as Ian's making his way up here, he has been in his family business, which is a wholesale meat business, one of the toughest businesses out there, for 18 years. I would know because I was in the burger business. So I once tried to get a purchase order from Ian and his business, and they're like, you guys are too freaking small. So here I am now, getting to grill him on stage. But after 18 years in this wholesale business, in 2014, he actually started one of Canada's first D2C stores in the meat business. So during COVID, when it hit, he was ready to scale up and hit $5 million a year in ARR. And then he did something very few people do. He completely walked away from his family business and then went on to buy another butcher and deli that was founded in 1948 named Dumouchel. And he's also a partner in a high-protein beef crisp company called Bingeworthy Snacks. I don't know how I remembered all this, but please, can I get a round of applause for Ian?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Did I miss anything?
No, you got it all.
I was nervous. I was like,
it's a long story.
There's a lot to remember.
You made it pretty short.
So take us back to the beginning. How'd you end up in the meat business?
It's a pretty funny story. So I was in university. My plan wasn't to be anywhere near it. I knew my parents worked, 80 hours a week. My grandfather worked himself to death. It wasn't anything that interested me at all. I went to Carleton. I was in economics with a minor in business. Loved numbers. Could always remember numbers. It was what I wanted to do. Second year university, I ended up getting sick, had a melanoma, needed to walk away, needed some time for myself to just kind of explore life. I really grew up, I was shy. I never said anything. I was just kind of that shy, awkward kid sitting in the corner, just kind of like practicing math. That's all I liked. So I left university and decided it was time to kind of spread my wings and learn and grow. And I started selling cars. It kind of helped me get out of that trapped box, try to get me to open up, talk to people, and kind of force myself into that reality.
New, used?
Both.
Okay.
But it was kind of like I was young and immature, very immature. And, you'd go out with your friends at night and, you'd meet someone and they'd be like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm a used car salesman. Okay. Best way to introduce yourself.
Yeah, yeah. So then it seems like there was a lot that happened before the meat business. So then how'd you go from used car salesman to the family biz?
Well, what ended up happening was my father, who had been running the wholesale business for many years, ended up getting sick. He had a heart attack. And every day after his heart attack, he'd call me, Ian, can you leave the shop? Can you leave the dealership? I needed to pick up some stuff. I needed to do one delivery. I needed to do 2 deliveries. And eventually it got to be more and more. And eventually we sat down and talked and said, listen, the meat business is growing. It's too much for me to look after. Is it something you want to do? Can you join me? Because I can't handle it myself.
Okay. And
so that was 2003.
That was 2003. And then you were in it for 18 years.
Yeah. So I was with him running his business. We grew from 1 million a year to 10 million in wholesale over that period of time. And then I walked away in 2021, January.
So what was it like, being in business with family? Because, they always say it's a bit of a roller coaster. So tell us about that.
I don't want to jade people, but don't do it. Run. Unless you're really strong and really have the ability to kind of stand up to your parents, which is very difficult. When your parents are telling you, okay, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to go here, you have to go there. This is a decision that I'm making and I'm the boss. And if you don't like it, go find somewhere else. It's not a fun experience. Working for your family is not all that it's cracked up to be. And not every parent is like mine. There are some parents that, get along well with their kids and understand and will actually listen. And I've learned to do that with my own children. As my oldest son, who's 18, works with me at the butcher shop currently. He is going to be going to school, but in that transition year that he's in right now, he is working for me. And I've learned from the experience of my parents not to treat him that way.
Besides the treatment, obviously, it sounds like there's a lot of history there, but obviously your father seemed to have run the business for a long time his way. What was it like trying to bring innovation in that 18 years and new ideas to the table?
it wasn't always easy. I mean, he's a smart businessman. I mean, he ran a good business. You know, the company did well through our sales and through our quality and service that we offered. We grew really well, but it was what he knew. So he knew the customer service and he knew dealing with people. And I learned that, and you know, the business was really growing in that direction. But building an online store was something he knew absolutely nothing about. You know, he didn't know what the internet was. He didn't know what email was. He could barely text even to this day. So, you know, when I speak to my kids, you know, have you spoken to your grandfather? They say, no, he hasn't called me. Well, I said, well, why don't you send him a text? My son says, well, he doesn't know how to text. Like, you can speak to your phone now and it sends a text. So he was pretty much a dinosaur and still is.
So you told me that you had started a D2C business in 2014. Most people at that time didn't even know what Shopify was, yet you were up and running on Shopify. Walk us through what that was like and like what made you decide to do that?
Nobody else was doing it. I mean, Canada, when you stop and think about it, you know, I live in Ottawa, and Ottawa had about 1 million people at the time. So you figure how many people are going to grocery stores, how many people are buying meat, what's their frequency, and then you stop and think the bigger picture. Think of Canada. Think of how many people are actually buying steaks for home, chicken, pork chops, bacon, whatever you have. Everybody's got their different favorites that they like. And when you look at the small amount of retail that you can do in one city versus, you know, 30 million people, it's a huge volume. So it actually came to me one day. I met Harley from Shopify. He was helping build one of the stores at, I think it was La Bottega in Ottawa, who's a great Italian grocery store. And Shopify had a competition one day. And actually, it was La Bottega that won. And Harley was in the store with some of the team from Shopify, and they were literally taking pictures of the products and building the store inside that grocery store. And I said, wow, this could really work. People would actually want to buy meat online if they trusted the source, if they knew the quality was there, and it could be delivered to their door. It would save them time, and it would be a win-win, quality and time back.
So obviously when we were chatting, you know, I know about the crazy scale up during COVID, but prior to that, what was the infrastructure like? Like, what was it like trying to send meat across the country, like in the early days?
It wasn't easy. It took a lot of trials and figuring out proper packaging. How was the product going to get from Ottawa to Vancouver, you know, Ottawa to PEI, and stay cold? So I actually found a couple of companies online that sold temperature monitoring equipment, figured out packaging from different sources, you know, thickness of insulation, different ways of dry ice. You even have to go as far as figuring out different size of dry ice. How much do I put in? And so doing all the calculations and testing, sending shipments to Vancouver, sending shipments to, you know, Nova Scotia, PEI, we actually came up with a tried and tested way that actually worked. And then once we ramped up, we figured out we'd include shipping, or we figured out people would pay their own shipping, and we trusted, at the time it was FedEx.
Can you walk everyone through here? Because I don't think people realize the scale at which you guys ramped up. Can you give them an idea of what it was like pre-ramp up to post-ramp up? Give us some insights and some numbers, and what was the scariest things you went through during that time?
So the pre-ramp up, to give you an idea, we were doing approximately $15,000 a month pre-COVID, just online sales and shipping all across Canada. So essentially
$500
a day.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. And then when COVID hit, you know, we started doing Facebook advertising. We were throwing money at it because it was at that point, it was unlimited. You could basically buy all the AdWords, nobody was spending anything, and you could acquire customers relatively cheaply, but we ended up spending about $1,000 a day just in Facebook ads, but we ended up doing approximately $500,000 a month. So to ramp up from $500 a day to,
It's like a 30x.
yeah, 30x in a matter of 3 months. You know,
Things must have broken. Like, walk us through the craziness of 30xing in 3 months.
it was a living hell. It was good, but it was a living hell. Because in the wholesale business, you know, once COVID hit, we went from doing 10 million a year to zero. There was no hotels, there was no conferences, there was no banquets, universities shut down, schools shut down, the Ottawa Centre stopped playing, the Red Black stopped playing, all the stadiums, everything shut. So you went from all your business to zero. So it was time to figure out what were you going to do? So I had a great network of suppliers. That was one of the things, the advantages that we had. We were able to buy product really well, know the quality, have it portioned, and sent to us directly. So when COVID first hit, we would start receiving our product 4 o'clock in the morning. So we'd go into work at 4, start breaking apart all the pallets, figuring out, printing off all the orders, you know, the 100 orders a day, getting the boxes ready, filling everything up, and by the time we got the trucks out on the road to deliver the local, and FedEx would show up at 5 o'clock every day for overnight. So, and then you'd have to get your day ready for the next day. So basically you were working from 4 in the morning till 8 at night every day.
Sounds worse than the bakery business, but after 18 years of doing this and really just scaling this new arm of the business, my understanding is you basically left and then went out to acquire your own business. Tell us a little bit more about that and the emotions behind that.
It was not easy. So working for your family was not fun, not always fun. Yeah. My father, who had done it all his life, was getting older. You know, he turned 75 and finally said, okay, it's time for me to leave. And so I spent most of my life working 80 to 90 hours a week, you know, from the time I was 23 until 39 years old, working, you know, 80 hours a week. You know, it was always promised to me. The business was always, Ian, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. Push comes to shove, it wasn't. You know, he said, buy me out. And that's okay. So there was a gentleman who I was supposed to be partners with. We presented it off to my father. He refused it, wanted more money. And this was just at the start of COVID, and kind of said, you know what? The business can't afford that. I understand the numbers. I see where things are going. So best of luck. I'm going to keep working and kind of get through COVID, and then I'll find my own thing. I'll figure it out.
How does one go about finding a business like that, and just kind of walk people through what that process looked like?
To be perfectly honest, it kind of fell in my lap.
Oh, yeah?
So when my father had actually refused the offer, it was kind of time to decide, what am I going to do? You know, am I going to go and start my own wholesale business? I know the customers. I can get a warehouse. I can get a truck. It's something I've done for a long time and I understand it, but do I really want to compete against my family? You know, it's still my father. He's still 75. Do I still want to try to take money out of his pocket and worry about his retirement and worry about him and what's going to happen with him? I didn't want to do that. So I was looking at other alternatives. What other businesses were out there? You know, I never finished university, so I didn't have that full idea of what a business could do. I didn't have an idea of how to transition from one to another. It really turned out to be kind of the skies opened up and this opportunity fell in my lap. You know, I was driving home one night and all of a sudden the phone rang. And I looked at the phone and it was this butcher shop, Dumouchel. And I said, well, it's 7 o'clock at night. I've never heard from him at this time. I wonder what's going on. Maybe it's something weird. Maybe he's got a problem. I don't know. I'll just answer it. Because normally at that time of day, I'm done work. I'm exhausted. I'm not answering the phone. But it just happened to be that day I answered it. And it was Mr. Dumouchel. You know, he was a third generation butcher as well. You know, worked for his father, his grandfather, and had a shop open for, you know, what was it, 80 years at that point. So he said, Ian, listen, I'm tired. COVID's hard on me. My son doesn't want to work. He's not interested in taking over the business. Is it something you're interested in? That was kind of like the sun shining down on me. I felt blessed that day. You know, I spent a lot of time working with my family, in not working out, and not wanting to go in and compete against my family, not wanting to fight. And, you know, it was a hard enough separation already, knowing that I was going to leave my family business to do my own thing. I didn't want to make it harder by fighting for customers and fighting for product and fighting with suppliers. I wanted to try to do it respectfully. So I figured this is going to be the best way that I can put all the knowledge that I've put in for the last 20 years and have my own space, have my own shop, and do my own thing without getting in that way.
So obviously you were running your family's business and now you have an opportunity to buy your own. What were some of the kind of, you know, lessons that you ended up learning where you now get to be your own boss? And what did you implement from day one that you really wanted to do, which sounds like you couldn't, back at the family biz?
There are lots of things that I wanted to implement, but the first major thing that I learned, and the hardest thing that I learned, was cash flow. You always have to watch your cash flow, because in any business, you know, you can understand your profit, you can understand your margins, you can make money, but if your cash flow isn't there, you're going to sink. You're just going to be making money, but you're going to see your cash dropping every day, and you're going to be trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I make more cash, which is not necessarily more profit, because you've got your suppliers to pay. It's not an easy thing. But once you kind of figure that part of it out, which takes time when you have your own business, you got to understand, you know, your payroll. But I'm very much a family business kind of guy, and I've learned that your employees, you're working for your employees. You know, you work every day and you put 100% into it, but if you don't have those employees that trust you and are there for you, and you trust them and they trust you, you've got to give them your all. And you're working, you know, now I feel like I'm retired. I'm only working 60 hours a week instead of 80. But you're there for your employees because they mean a lot. You know, they're putting food on the table, and they're the backbone of your company. If you want to not be there, and if you want to, you know, come to Toronto to speak at TechTO, you know, you've got to have somebody that you trust and that's there, that's got your back. And if you treat them like a number and you treat them like, quote unquote, an employee, you're never going to have that. You need to have a bit of heart. You need to treat them with respect always, obviously. You need to treat them well and make sure that they're looked after, so they help look after you and that they actually care.
So you've been in the wholesale business, you sell direct, you've scaled an e-com business, D2C, to $5 million a year. How have you blended all of those learnings and lessons into Dumouchel? And tell us a little bit more about Bingeworthy Snacks as well.
So learning all those lessons through the family business and building the online store and scaling it kind of gave me a bit of the foundation and groundwork for co-founding Bingeworthy Snacks. So Bingeworthy is a high-protein snack company. So we currently sell in Canada, and we're looking for a production plant, because production in Canada is very difficult to find. It has to be a meat plant. I wish. But thank you. And we also have a production plant in the U.S., so we distribute in the U.S. as well. But without the foundation and the knowledge that I had through Dumouchel of suppliers, cold chain, distribution, production, and how things need to be set up and built, I wouldn't have known anything for Bingeworthy.
Okay. What was the biggest surprise about like starting a D2C beef crisp company?
Everything was a surprise. We didn't know anything. We didn't know if people would actually even like it. So beef crisps, which is a new product to market, there's nobody that makes it in Canada. There's a few companies in the US that make a similar product, but the quality isn't as good. So we didn't know if anybody would really even like it. We tried to make it at the store. You know, it happened actually, I bought a dehydrator the week before that one of my co-founders approached me, and we said, well, let's try to make this product. It's very similar to jerky, but it's thinner and crispy. So We went through about 10 renditions of trying it. And then the next thing you know, we said, okay, there's a retail store here. Let's get people to try it. So we just make it and have customers come in. What do you think? Is it crispy? Is it too crispy? What's the flavor profile? Did you enjoy it? And so once we got to a rendition that people actually enjoyed, we said, well, let's see if it actually sells. So before we started making the product and selling it online, we just made an online store and started trying to see if it would sell. And it did. And then all of a sudden, orders are coming in, and we're like, uh-oh, what are we going to do now? So we actually had to start producing the product to fill these orders that were coming in, and then more orders are coming in, and then all of a sudden, a customer who would order it online comes from Toronto, actually went into a local supplement store, and he said, have you seen this product yet? And they said, no. He said, well, I ordered it online. It came shipped to my house. What do you think? And it's a supplement store called Lift the City.
Okay.
And they're in downtown Toronto. Great store, great people. They really care too. And they started ordering. And then so they carried it in their store. And then a few butcher shops have picked it up. And then, you know, it's just surprising to see that through word of mouth and how one person likes a product, they can almost become your brand champion.
Yeah. So you started that D2C, and now it sounds like it's going to retail. That seems to have happened by accident, but now is that something that you guys are considering? And if so, like, how'd your prior experience with the D2C brand kind of inform this one?
It's definitely happening.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're working on scaling in the U.S. now, and we're working on trying to find a Canadian manufacturer. You know, the volume that we can do currently isn't enough for what we want to sell.
Okay.
And so we're looking for another Canadian production plant so we can produce and sell more in Canada. But right now we're unlimited in the U.S. Currently, we're not selling at full capacity, but it's getting there. But having understanding that D2C model and where your major centers are, and ad spend and cost of acquisition and your long-term value of a customer, understanding all those numbers, once you figure all of those out, then it makes it easier to set yourself up for success as trying to have a D2C instead of just starting from nothing.
And speaking of starting from nothing, like, there's a lot of people that are involved with family businesses, or they're looking to buy an existing one. What advice would you have for those people, and what would you tell them before they make the jump?
Go for the decision. Honestly, it's better to start now than 10 years from now. If you wait to think that you've got to learn more and figure out more before you make that big decision, I think you may be doing yourself a disservice. You can learn along the way. You're never going to know everything, and at the ripe age of 48, I'm still learning. You know, every day whether it's AI or whether it's a new distribution channel or looking at contribution margin for your product mix. You know, there's always something to learn. You never know everything. There's always going to be something. And just take that step. Take that chance, especially when you're young. You've got a lot of life to live, and you can make a lot of mistakes and still recover. You know, at 48, I say I'm only at halfway in my life. You know, we're living longer. There's a lot to do. Take those chances.
Awesome. Well, everyone, I want a round of applause for Ian. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
We've only got time for a few questions before we're getting kicked out of here. So if we can, please go ahead.
Thank you for the session. I wanted to ask, like you were mentioning about your supply chain that you would be shipping out to PEI from Ottawa, your packaging grade, fuel cost. How do you remain competitive with all of those costs, especially in meat?
One of my expertise has always been purchasing. So I had a great supplier network, knowing what I can purchase, the cost on it, figuring out even the packaging, all your ad spend. It made it still worthwhile to ship products out, and is also based off volume. So the larger your volume, you know, if you had a certain size box, you knew what was going to be able to fit in it. So you're trying to fit the largest value items in it.
Thank you.
Perfect. Couple more questions.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for sharing your story. I'm just curious. I'm part of the go-to-market sales industry, and I was just wondering, when you decided to go sell online, did you seek out a marketing agency, or were they seeking you out? And like, what was your process? Because I know that was an exciting time. Just interested to learn your experience.
Back in those days, back in 2014, when we actually went to market with Shopify, there wasn't really a lot of marketing teams. So we didn't really understand what ad spend was through Facebook. We didn't know about Google AdWords. It was kind of just guessing. So we really did everything ourselves. But there wasn't a huge focus in those days at building something online. So we just kind of built it, and it grew organically. You know, you'd grow from, you know, $100 a day to $200 a day to $500 a day, and it would steadily grow just through word of mouth, as opposed to spending a lot of money until essentially COVID hit, when, you know, there was a lot more knowledge and you could get those metrics of, you know, cost of acquisition and figuring out where your money was better spent.
Thank you. One last question.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is pretty simple. How do you stay healthy when you're working like 80 hours a week?
You really have to look after yourself and your body. I'm very much a gym goer, and I'm very fortunate that I don't need a lot of sleep. So, you know, I'm at the gym every morning from 5 until 7, 6 days a week. You know, I try to make sure I get enough protein, and having a protein snack company, that helps.
That helps.
But really watching what I eat. I don't typically drink much alcohol. Drugs are not a thing for me. But mainly it's gym and eating well.
All right, thank you.
Guys, can I get a round of applause for Ian, please?
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.